Alright, folks, buckle up, it's time for another no-nonsense deep dive into the economic disaster brewing in Europe's largest economy. Yes, I'm talking about Germany, the country that once defined industrial might and now finds itself on a path toward decline so protracted, so subtle, that it threatens to bring not just Germany, but potentially all of Europe, to its knees. Germany's economic foundation, the rock-solid bedrock that historically drove Europe's post-war recovery and integration, is cracking. The political class? Absolutely clueless, either too paralyzed by indecision or too focused on preserving their own political fortunes to take bold action. And remember, this isn't just about rising bread prices or higher energy bills. No, this is about systemic decay, a frame-by-frame collapse that mirrors the slow disintegration of a once flourishing empire. Let's break it down. We've got declining competitiveness on the industrial front, an energy reliance that just got choked off, the gradual erosion of household wealth, and politicians locked in a bitter ideological tug of war that's hurting the people they claim to serve. But hang with me here, we'll unpack these layers one by one, from point to surface, and by the time we're done, you'll understand why Germany's downturn could be the start of something much bigger and darker for Europe. Let's start with raw numbers, because nothing cuts through the BS like data. Germany's economy is now 5% smaller than it should have been had it continued on its pre-pandemic growth trajectory. That's a staggering statistic for a country that once prided itself as the industrial backbone of Europe. More worrying still, economists at Bloomberg have estimated that the bulk of this shortfall will prove tough to recover. What happened? Germany's problems are, at their core, structural. This isn't just a post-COVID hangover or a blip due to the war in Ukraine, this is deeper. Germany's famed national competitiveness has lost its mojo. We've got Germany's auto giants like Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz falling behind as China's electric vehicle manufacturers speed ahead. This is no joke. The entire German automotive industry, once the pride of Europe, now risks hemorrhaging market share and losing its standing on the global stage. Here's a bitter figure to chew on. Experts estimate that every German household is effectively €2,500 poorer per year because of the economy's freefall. It's not that Germany is lacking the will to succeed, it's handicapped by outdated strategies, poor political leadership, and external factors like the collapse of cheap Russian energy supplies. Germany's demise didn't happen overnight. Amy Webb, a prominent strategist behind the Future Today Institute, described this scenario as a very protracted decline. Translation: it's a slow-motion car crash of an entire nation, and what's worse, Europe is buckled into the passenger seat, completely along for the ride. To fully grasp Germany's current situation, we need to dissect the causes, starting with 1. Energy crisis. Germany's over-reliance on cheap Russian gas stands out as the most critical error of recent decades. Angela Merkel's energy policies, which deepened dependence on Russian imports, left Germany brutally exposed when Vladimir Putin decided to cozy up to autocracy and invade Ukraine. Once Moscow turned off the taps, Germany found itself staring at an energy void without a viable short-term substitute. 2. Industrial decline. Germany's traditional manufacturing sectors, steel, automobiles, chemicals, have not adapted quickly enough to the changing landscape of global competition. As firms like Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz struggle to keep pace with the ascendant Chinese EV makers, industries that once lifted the German economy are now becoming liabilities. 3. Political paralysis. And let's talk about the political deadlock. Chancellor Olaf Scholz is floundering. Losing confidence in parliament, Scholz is facing a likely ousting, and yet the alternatives don't look much better. With Scholz's SPD fighting off resurgent populism on both the far right, AfD, and far left, Sarah Wagenknecht's new BSW party, the mainstream political landscape is in disarray. The atmosphere is ripe for paralysis. For failing public policy initiatives, despite talk of digitalization and streamlining bureaucracy, you'd be hard-pressed to find actual progress. Germany's infrastructure is crumbling, innovation investments are paralyzed by red tape, and the once reliable Mittelstand, which gave rise to Germany's famous economic hidden champions, now finds itself struggling with global competition in a strangling regulatory environment. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, hey, this is just Germany's problem, I'm fine over here. Think again. Germany is not just the cornerstone of its economy, it's the linchpin of the entire European project. And given the growing global challenges, it's a linchpin the world cannot afford to lose. When Germany sneezes, Europe catches a cold, and we're on the verge of full-blown economic pneumonia. Consider this, Germany accounts for nearly 25% of the Eurozone's GDP. A German recession, or worse, stagflation, has the potential to drag the entire European economy down with it. Worse still, without Germany's industrial heft, Europe will struggle to remain competitive with China's increasingly sophisticated manufacturing sector or to push back against the United States' more protectionist policies. And on top of it all, wage stagnation, disenchanted voters, and a populist wave threatening to sweep in at any moment. The toxic brew of declining economic growth, energy insecurity, and political uncertainty is spreading beyond Germany's borders and rippling through the Eurozone. Okay, so if you've followed the analysis this far, you might be asking, what's the way out? Do we just sit here and watch Germany drive itself, along with Europe, off the cliff? To avoid this fate, Germany needs to adapt, and fast. Grandiose talk of snap elections aside, a policy revolution is required, one that tackles long-neglected issues like 1. Energy independence. The first, and perhaps largest, roadblock Germany faces is the urgent need to decouple from Russian energy sources and switch to more sustainable, reliable energy. This calls not for timid half-steps, but for an all-in pivot to green energy, something that's been slower than required. 2. Digitization and innovation. One of the saddest truths is that Germany, which once drove industrial innovation, is now lagging behind in the age of digital transformation. Investment in digital infrastructure, high-speed internet, 5G networks, cloud computing, you name it, is sorely underwhelming. We're talking about a country where government paperwork is still often done manually, longhand, on paper, in 2024. 3. A new model for competitiveness. Germany needs a new, more competitive industrial model, focusing not just on keeping defense strong but also on bolstering green technologies, electric vehicles, and pharmaceuticals. Otherwise, it will keep bleeding jobs and capital overseas. 4. Spending, not saving. Here's the controversial bit. Germany has the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. So, it's not like they couldn't afford to pull out the economic stopgap known as spending. To prevent further economic rot, Germany needs to loosen its stringent debt brake, recognize that investments today will pay off tomorrow, and start plowing money into future-proof industries before it's too late. Yes. The notion of a political rescue via elections, a Hail Mary attempt to reverse course. With Friedrich Merz, the frontrunner from the CDU, we're hearing buzzwords like low taxes, limited regulation, and a skeptical view on any bending of fiscal rules, such as the debt brake. Meanwhile, the far-right AfD continues its disturbing climb in the polls, benefiting from frustrated voters looking for a scapegoat as things unravel. Let me tell you up front, though, political will is the Achilles heel of the entire problem. By the time these divided factions agree on even the most mundane policies, we might have already crossed the economic Rubicon. The new coalition government tasked with leading Germany after the February elections, whatever form it takes, must seize the moment with an aggressive and forward-looking action plan that takes on the country's energy, industrial, and fiscal shortcomings with an urgency that up to now has been seriously lacking. Ladies and gentlemen, the window of opportunity for Germany to reverse course is narrowing by the day. The country's overhaul of its energy policies, investment in infrastructure, digitization, and reforms aimed at restoring the competitiveness of its workforce must now come faster and with more determination, or the rest of Europe will quickly feel the fallout. The stark reality is this: Germany cannot simply retreat into a cocoon, hoping for some sort of economic miracle. It must adapt, innovate, and shed its dependence on outdated industrial models that are no longer viable in today's hyper-competitive global economy. The real horror here is not an overnight collapse, but the slow, almost imperceptible erosion of a country that's lost its way, and no one in Berlin seems to have a map. The question now is, does Germany have the will and the vision to confront these roadblocks before it's too late? If not, the consequences for Europe, and indeed the world, could be catastrophic.